Hello and how's it going, everyone? It is Skullzi here with the latest and the greatest gaming news. You might hear multiple random dogs barking throughout this video. I don't know if my neighborhood is being invaded by sentient alien dogs or if there is some kind of like strange dog adventure going on somewhere nearby, but either way the content must continue, and a lot of you have been sending me this information, this situation, or at least asking me what my opinion on this is. The thing that I'm going to be covering in today's video, and that is that 2 days ago, Xbox's Major Nelson did a podcast for Xbox at the end of the year, at 2020, and invited Phil Spencer on for the last half of the podcast, and they talked about a lot of interesting things, and Phil Spencer actually kind of went into somewhat new details regarding the Bethesda and Microsoft partnership acquisition, whatever you want to call it. Well, he does somewhat say the same thing he has always been saying. The wording he uses is different, and I kind of want to break it all down and give you my thoughts on at least what I think this could mean for the future of this Bethesda-Microsoft acquisition thing. And like I said, the official source of this was a podcast uploaded on Major Nelson's actual YouTube channel on December 31st. If you want to watch this entire thing for yourself, I'll put a link to it down in the description below. It is a pretty fun and interesting thing, especially if you're a fan of Xbox, because Major Nelson has been around in the Xbox community for a long time now, and of course Phil Spencer has been in the spotlight and has been doing plenty of interviews ever since this Bethesda and Microsoft acquisition thing was announced. That is how huge this situation is, and that's actually where we're gonna kind of begin, at least regarding Phil Spencer's thoughts and what he mentions regarding this Bethesda stuff. Now, Phil Spencer's particular thoughts and statements on the Bethesda acquisition happen actually right around the 48-minute and 55-second mark. I'm gonna break down what he says and give you my thoughts on his statements from around 48 minutes to about the 50-minute mark or so. He only really talks about what I at least consider the most interesting parts regarding Bethesda for just a few minutes, but it's still pretty interesting. And an interesting thing is, he begins by saying how much he appreciates that Bethesda kind of chose Microsoft and Xbox for this partnership, almost as if Microsoft was just one of many choices.
So when it came time when they were looking at potentially becoming part of a bigger company, getting sold, I was glad that we were part of the conversation that they were willing to have, and it really means something to me that they would sign up to becoming part of Xbox. And I've had a lot of good conversations. Todd and Robert and I, we talk all the time.
Which obviously, technically, yes, Bethesda could have partnered with anyone, but the thing is, it's been rumored that potentially Bethesda or ZeniMax or whatever, ZeniMax is Bethesda, so I guess it would more or less be ZeniMax and Bethesda. It's been rumored that ZeniMax and Bethesda have kind of been looking to be purchased or looking for a partnership like this for some time, and maybe have been negotiating with even Sony and PlayStation for doing the same exact thing with them. And we kind of see a little bit of this in the Deathloop and the Ghostwire Tokyo timed exclusivity deal with Sony. So that's kind of evidence that maybe Bethesda was actually talking with Sony about partnering with them instead of Microsoft. Only they went with Microsoft, and there's numerous reasons for this. Microsoft dropped $7 billion on this. That's a pretty big reason.
We need $7 billion.
That's right.
I kind of don't think Sony would have valued this partnership as much, because Sony already has a lot of first-party exclusives or just exclusives in general, and Microsoft doesn't as many, and having all of ZeniMax, all of Bethesda Softworks Studios, including Bethesda Game Studios, as potential Microsoft exclusives would definitely warrant $7 billion. And also another thing we need to keep in mind is that Bethesda and Microsoft have always had a close working relationship going way back to Morrowind. Morrowind was only on the Xbox, it wasn't on the PlayStation, and a lot of the future Elder Scrolls and Fallout content was released on the Xbox and the PC first. And also Microsoft even changed the actual system specs of the Xbox 360 specifically for Oblivion so it could be a better launch title. So you can clearly see there is a great close working relationship between Microsoft and Bethesda, so it's not surprising why Bethesda chose Microsoft. However, judging by Phil Spencer's actual specific wording about how much he appreciates that Bethesda Bethesda chose Microsoft could just be like, you know, that PR niceness, just being nice and showing appreciation publicly because that's what public relations people would want you to do, or it could be what I think is a sign that Bethesda was indeed at least kind of thinking about maybe going with Sony. I don't know who else Bethesda would consider partnering with. It obviously would be between Sony and Microsoft, so yeah, anyway, that's what I think about this. And then Phil Spencer talks about how much he actually appreciates kind of Microsoft allowing Xbox to do this deal, because one thing we gotta remember here is Microsoft is a huge company.
The other thing I'll just say, and this is more probably for me than anybody else will care about, you know, the commitment that the company, Microsoft, has given us when we rolled into Sarah Bond and Matt Booty and I roll into Satya and the Satya Nadella, the CEO, and Amy Hood, the CFO, and say, hey, we have this idea.
We need $7 billion.
That's right.
They do a ton of stuff other than Xbox. Microsoft makes hardware for PCs and other things. Microsoft is a gigantic company, a big software and hardware technology giant. And Xbox, even though it's a large piece of the puzzle, it's just one piece of the Microsoft puzzle. So Xbox actually going to Microsoft and asking for permission to like use $7 billion for this acquisition is kind of a big deal if you think about it in terms of like a financial thing. And if that actually kind of made me look at the situation from a different perspective, because this is indeed a huge investment from Microsoft to Xbox, and Xbox would have to convince Microsoft that this investment is like as worthwhile as possible. And with that in mind, I'm kind of wondering if maybe at least more Microsoft and Xbox exclusivity in terms of Bethesda's future titles is more of a real possibility. We might actually truly see some 100% full Xbox and Microsoft exclusive Bethesda games, or at least the big titles like Starfield and The Elder Scrolls 6. But either way, this is something we already knew, but just judging by the way that Phil Spencer worded this in this interview, it just kind of makes me look at things from a different perspective and makes me wonder at least if exclusivity is indeed more of a possibility than I may have actually thought like a little while ago. Also, kind of right before Phil Spencer actually talks about Bethesda, he does say that same diatribe, that same thing that everyone who talks about this has been saying, which everyone does need to keep in mind. So
2021 is when we'll get final approval. I feel really good about that. Everything's on track. We'll start then really getting to some of the planning that we can do with them. Right now, we're really hands off with them as they continue to do the work that they're doing, because we don't own them yet.
It's good that Phil Spencer mentions this, but at the same time, you can tell by the tone of his voice that he immediately remembers he has to say this before mentioning this, almost like it was a plot point given to him by the rules and regulations of what he could say and can't say in any kind of interview like this. But either way, he does mention again that this Bethesda and this Microsoft acquisition isn't going to be finished until like sometime probably in early 2021, and he says Microsoft doesn't own Bethesda until then, so they can't really talk about anything about like what they're going to do or what their plans with Bethesda would be legally until this thing is finished. But the partnership and stuff should go through, and either way, that's just something you need to keep in mind anytime you hear any talk about this Bethesda Microsoft stuff. And then another thing that Phil Spencer says, which is the main reason people have been asking me about this like few minutes in this podcast, is Phil Spencer talks about Starfield specifically.
Exciting news. I can't wait to get it closed, and so we can start working like one company, and incredibly excited about Starfield and a lot of the other things, some of the things announced, some of them not announced, that they're working on.
I think it's like the only game he actually mentions while he's talking about Bethesda, which is Starfield, and he does mention other studios, but any time that Phil Spencer talks about this Bethesda and Microsoft acquisition, usually while on the topic about 2021, he talks about how excited he is for Starfield, and he has kind of low-key mentioned that he has seen and potentially even played Starfield before, because he's been game testing or at least playing games before they were released in regards to Bethesda Game Studios as early as Fallout 4. At least he said that on record. So if he's played Fallout 4 before it was released, I'm sure he's played Skyrim before it came out, probably, and I'm sure he has played Starfield by now, especially if it's supposed to come out in November of 2021, which I believe and the majority of the gaming community believes as well. And like I said, anytime that 2021 seems to be the topic of the conversation, it eventually shifts over to him talking about how excited he is for Starfield, which is again low-key what happened in this few minutes that he was talking about Bethesda to Major Nelson in this podcast, and that is pretty interesting. I mean, Starfield is going to be a huge game for Bethesda Game Studios, the first new franchise, new gaming universe they have ever made, I think, since basically Elder Scrolls, probably, since they actually invented the universe a long time ago. So this is super hype. I'm super excited for Starfield, and it seems like Phil Spencer is pretty excited for it as well. So maybe he saw something super exciting, amazing, awesome behind the scenes that has him just constantly mentioning this game anytime he can, because I don't think he needs to mention Starfield as much as he has. In fact, probably Bethesda would wish he hasn't, but he seems to want to talk about Starfield when he can, anytime Bethesda is brought up, and anytime that 2021 is somewhat low-key linked to the conversation. So this is some heavy speculation, salt-based evidence that maybe Starfield is indeed coming in 2021, although there's plenty of evidence to support that that game is releasing this year. But either way, that's basically everything that Phil Spencer has to say in this interview, other than the fact that this Bethesda acquisition thing is it makes up for more than half of Microsoft's first-party or exclusive studios or potential exclusive studios.
It doubles the size of our first-party studios when Bethesda joins, which is pretty amazing.
It doubles in numbers, but the other parts of it almost quadruples it in footprint, in catalog and what, right?
So that just also plays in the perspective just how huge this Bethesda purchase is. So that's super hype for the future of Microsoft, super hype for the future of Bethesda, because now Bethesda has all this access to this high-tech Microsoft stuff, to all the new bleeding-edge technology and software that Microsoft has for the gaming industry, and I'm sure that their games are going to be even more amazing because of this. But either way, I'll go ahead and I'll play you the entire unedited, unclipped 2-minute section of Phil Spencer talking about Bethesda right at the end of this video, so you can kind of watch it all for yourself as well. But remember, the link to the entire podcast is down in the description below. But either way, that's everything I want to talk about in today's video.
We've just built a real trust relationship. Todd was always one of the first people I would take the hardware out to and go show him our new hardware, whether it was Xbox One S or One X or the new consoles, and get his point of view and Robert's point of view on what we were doing. So when it came time, when they were looking at potentially becoming part of a bigger company, getting sold, I was glad that we were part of the conversation that they were willing to have. And it really means something to me that they would sign up to becoming part of Xbox. And I've had a lot of good conversations. Todd and Robert and I, we talk all the time. 2021 is when we'll get final approval. I feel really good about that. Everything's on track. We'll start then really getting to some of the planning that we can do with them. Right now, we're really hands off with them as they continue to do the work that they're doing, because we don't own them yet. But the other thing I'll just say, and this is more probably for me than anybody else will care about, the commitment that the company, Microsoft, has given us when we rolled into Sarah Bond and Matt Booty and I roll into Satya and the Satya Nadella, the CEO, and Amy Hood, the CFO, and say, hey, we have this idea.
We need $7 billion.
That's right. And some people might know this. Our CFO for Xbox is somebody named Tim Stewart, and he's there. And Amy has a ton of trust in him. And our business is doing well. We're running a profitable, growing business. They have a lot of belief. But I mean, just the fact that we would go through an acquisition of this size for the gaming business at Microsoft. That Monday we were announcing, I couldn't sleep that Sunday night. I was just, I was nervous. I was anxious. I was excited, all the emotions. And it just was so cool. And then to see when we kept it quiet, and to see the reaction from Xbox fans, and probably more importantly to me right now is the Bethesda teams.
Sure.
Because those teams are going to be very, very critical to our progress going forward. So exciting news. I can't wait to get it closed, and so we can start working like one company, and incredibly excited about Starfield and a lot of the other things, some of the things announced, some of them not announced, that they're working on. I just think they're going to be an incredible addition to our studios, because when I think about our RPG capability with Obsidian, with In Exile, with the work that Playground is doing, which is now out there with Fable, obviously, and with what Bethesda can do, it's massive capability. I think about our FPS capability with id, and obviously 343 and the work that we can do. Just it doubles the size of our first party studios when Bethesda joins, which is pretty amazing.
It doubles in numbers, but the other parts of it like almost quadruples it in footprint in catalog and what, right?
And geography, you know, yeah. I think about where they are, which is an important thing, because I want to have teams from different places on the world.
Less so nowadays because we're all over the place.
That's right. But, you know, we always tell stories through our own lived experience, and I'm excited about getting to know some of those. I know some of the teams. I don't know other parts of that team, but that'll be a fun part of it. But yeah, I'm excited about 2021, and Bethesda is an incredibly important part of that.
Let me know what you think about Phil Spencer's statements in this podcast down in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, and turn notifications on so you can be notified right when I upload a new video. And if you want to help grow the channel and the community, be sure to share the video as well, because sharing content is the best way to help grow a channel and the community, and I would totally appreciate it, because YouTube isn't like notifying some subscribers of my uploads. YouTube isn't showing people who aren't subscribed to my channel my uploads sometimes either, so my channel isn't growing as fast because the algorithm just doesn't like me for some reason. So if you share content and make sure you're subscribed, I would greatly appreciate it. And speaking of appreciation, huge thank you to these amazing people for going above and beyond to bring you content like this. If you want to get a shout out in this list in literally every one of my future videos from this point forward, you can support the channel over on Ko-fi, Patreon, or here on YouTube as an exclusive channel member. Links for all this and more are down in the description below, and as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time, when Starfield's release date was in our hearts this entire time.
It just works.